"You'll never see them again," she screamed, clutching my grandchildren's hands. The room went silent as her cruel threat echoed. But one hidden document turned the tables completely. She thought she had one. Instead, she lost everything. If you've made it this far, you probably recognize that families aren't always what we imagine. Right here on this channel, you'll find a safe space where real stories like mine are told without judgment. These stories will move you, make you reflect, and perhaps even help you better understand your own family experiences. Subscribe to the channel and be part of this community where every story matters and where you're always welcome. Now I'll tell you all the details of this experience that changed my life forever. Her words still echo in my mind as if they had been spoken yesterday. "You'll never see them again," Sarah screamed, gripping my grandchildren's hands so tightly that I could see the discomfort on Emma and Liam's small faces. The silence that followed was deafening, as if time had frozen in that terrible moment. I could feel my heart pounding so hard in my chest, I thought everyone in the room could hear it. 58 years of life, and I had never experienced pain as profound as that threat. My own grandchildren, the lights of my life being used as weapons against me by my daughter-in-law. But she didn't know about the document hidden deep in my jewelry drawer for almost 10 years. A document that, when it finally came to light, completely changed the game. Sarah thought she had won that day, that she had complete power over me and my grandchildren's lives. Instead, she lost everything. Absolutely everything. My name is Ann Wilson. I'm 62 years old now, and this is the story of how I nearly lost touch with my precious grandchildren, and how I regained not only them but also my dignity and my place in this family. It's a story of betrayal, manipulation, and pain, but also of hope, justice, and the true meaning of familial love. If you're a grandmother, a mother, or simply someone who values family bonds, perhaps my story can serve as a wake-up call or even inspiration. Because I learned the hard way that sometimes those we love most can become our worst enemies, and that standing up for ourselves is not just a right, but a necessity. It all started when my only son Robert met Sarah during a business trip to Chicago. He was 27, a promising young man, recently graduated, and had a job as a financial analyst at a reputable Boston bank. I was so proud of him. Ever since my husband David passed away from a heart attack when Robert was just 15, it had been just the two of us against the world. I worked 2 jobs as a nurse during the day and a supermarket cashier at night to ensure he could attend a good university. Our bond was unshakable, or so I thought. Sarah was stunning at first sight, with long red hair and a smile that lit up any room. When Robert brought her home for the first time 3 months after they met, she was all charm and kindness. She complimented my modest home in the Boston suburbs, the food I prepared with such care, and was absolutely enchanted by the stories of Robert's childhood that I shared. She seemed perfect, perhaps too perfect, but at the time, I was just happy that my son had found someone who seemed to love him as much as I did. The wedding took place just 8 months later. It was a quick, simple ceremony with few guests. Sarah's parents didn't attend. She explained that they were traveling in Europe and couldn't rearrange their plans. I thought it was strange, but I didn't question it. Robert was radiant with happiness, and that was all that mattered to me. I sold my engagement ring, the last physical reminder I had of David, to help pay for the small event. Robert protested, but I insisted. "Your father would have wanted this," I told him. "He always wanted to see you happy." At first, everything seemed perfect. Robert and Sarah bought a small house just 20 minutes from mine. I visited them once a week for family dinner, and occasionally Sarah and I would go out for coffee or shopping together. She always seemed interested in my life, asking about my work, my friends, my finances. At the time, I interpreted this as genuine interest, a desire to get to know the mother of the man I loved better. How foolish I was. One afternoon over coffee, Sarah casually asked, "Anne, haven't you ever considered selling your house? It seems too big for just one person." I was a little taken aback by the question. It was true that since Robert left, the place had felt a little empty, but it was the home David and I had built together, full of precious memories. "No, I've never seriously considered it," I replied. "Besides, it's almost paid off. Only 5 more years on the mortgage." Sarah nodded thoughtfully, changing the subject as quickly as she had introduced it. That was the first of many small probes into my financial situation. Another time while helping Sarah choose a birthday present for Robert, she commented, "Robert told me about the college fund you set up for him. It was so generous of you. Have you managed to save much over the years?" Again, the question seemed innocent enough. "A little," I replied vaguely. "Enough to feel secure in retirement, I hope." She smiled, her green eyes shining in a way that, in retrospect, should have alarmed me. "That's wonderful, Anne. It's so important to have that security." Emma was born exactly 1 year after the wedding. My first granddaughter, a tiny, perfect little thing with my Robert's blue eyes and Sarah's red hair. The moment I held her in my arms for the first time, I felt a love so intense it nearly took my breath away. I cried with joy in that hospital room, silently promising Emma that I would be the best grandmother any child could ask for. Sarah was exhausted after the birth, but she smiled when I commented on how absolutely perfect Emma was. "Yes," she said, "she is perfect. Our little princess." In the first few months after Emma's birth, I was there almost every day. Robert returned to work after 2 weeks, and Sarah seemed grateful for my help. I cooked, cleaned, shopped, and most importantly, helped with Emma. At night, when Sarah could finally rest, I rocked my granddaughter and sang the same lullabies I used to sing to Robert. Those were precious moments, moments I will hold dear to my heart forever. It was during this time that Sarah began talking about Emma's future. And she said one night as I rocked the baby to sleep, "Robert and I are thinking about opening a savings account for Emma's college education. You know, it's never too early to start planning." I nodded enthusiastically. "That's a great idea. I started Robert's savings account when he was just 2. Sarah smiled, adjusting the blanket around Emma. "Actually, we were thinking, it would be so wonderful if you could contribute too. You know, like you did with Robert. It doesn't have to be a lot, just whatever you can help with." At first, I was touched by the request. Of course, I wanted to help secure my granddaughter's future. "I'd love to contribute," I replied without hesitation. "I can put in $300 a month to start. It's not much, but it will add up over time." Sarah's smile widened. "Oh, Anne, that's so generous. Emma is so lucky to have a grandmother like you." Liam was born 2 years later. 2 wonderful grandsons, and I was in heaven. I officially retired from the hospital shortly after his birth, wanting to devote more time to my growing family. Robert had been promoted at work, and with my small pension and savings, I increased my contribution to $500 a month to be divided equally between the 2 grandchildren. It's for their future, I told myself as I made the transfer each month, so they have all the opportunities they deserve. Sarah always thanked me, profusely telling me how well the money was being invested, how it was growing, and how one day Emma and Liam would be so grateful to Grandma Anne for her generosity. Sometimes she even showed me bank statements pointing out the steadily rising numbers. I felt good knowing I was doing something tangible to help my family. It was when Liam turned 1 that I began to notice the first changes in Sarah. Small things at first. She began canceling our family dinners, claiming the kids were tired or slightly ill. When I visited, she seemed impatient, checking her watch frequently, suggesting I might be tiring the kids out. My visits, which had previously lasted hours, were reduced to a strictly timed 45 minutes. One Sunday, I arrived for lunch with gifts for the children. It's a small wooden train set for Liam and a picture book for Emma. Sarah took the gifts with a tight smile. "Anne, that's very kind of you, but we really don't need any more toys. The house is already a mess." I was surprised, but tried not to show my hurt. "Oh, sorry. I thought they might like." She placed the gifts on a high shelf out of the children's reach. "Maybe another time. They've had enough stimulation today." And then the rules began to emerge. I wasn't to bring gifts without consulting her first. I wasn't to give the children candy. I wasn't to contradict her parenting decisions in front of the children. Reasonable rules, I thought, if a bit rigid. But I was determined to be a good grandmother and respect the boundaries set by the parents. So I obeyed without question. One time when Emma was about 3, she fell and scraped her knee while playing in the yard. Instinctively, I ran to her, picked her up, and kissed the small wound. "It's okay, honey," I whispered, wiping away her tears. Grandma's here." Sarah appeared as if by magic, taking Emma from my arms. "Emma needs to learn to deal with small pains," she said firmly. "If we comfort her too much for every scrape, she'll never develop resilience." I recoiled, feeling chastised and confused. Wasn't it natural to comfort a crying child when Emma turned 4 and Liam turned 2? Sarah announced she was enrolling Emma in an expensive private school. "It's the best in the area," she explained during one of our increasingly rare family dinners. "All the kids of important people go there." Robert looked uncomfortable, picking at his food without actually eating. "It's quite expensive," he commented quietly. Sarah smiled sweetly at him. "But honey, you said yourself our daughter deserves the best. Besides, your mom is contributing to the education fund, so it's not a problem, right?" And something about the way she said it bothered me, but I smiled and nodded. "Sure, whatever's best for Emma." Later, when Sarah left the room to put the kids to bed, I asked Robert how much this school cost. He hesitated before answering. $17,000 a year. I nearly choked. "Robert, that's more than I contribute all year." He didn't meet my eyes. "I know, Mom. I'm working overtime. It'll be fine." It was then that I noticed how tired Robert looked, with deep circles under his eyes and slumped shoulders. "Son, is everything okay? You look exhausted." He ran a hand over his face, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that my heart ached. "I've just been working a lot lately. The bank is going through a restructuring, and we're all under pressure." I hesitated before asking the next question. "And at home, are things okay between you and Sarah?" His answer was too quick. "Of course, Mom, everything's great. Sarah's a wonderful mother, you know that." That night, lying in my lonely bed, I did the math. Over the past 4 years, I had contributed nearly $4,000, money that was supposedly being saved for the children's education. But if that money was truly saved, why would Robert need to work overtime? Doubt planted a small seed of distrust in my heart, a seed that would unfortunately grow much larger in the years to come. 2 weeks after that dinner, I got a call from Sarah. "And," she said, her voice oddly formal, "Robert and I have been talking. We think it would be best if you reduced your visits for a while. Emma is adjusting to the new school, and this whole transition has been stressful for her. So many visitors and different stimuli can be confusing." I fell silent, trying to process what I was hearing. "But how long is a while?" I finally asked. "A few weeks, maybe a month or 2. We'll see how things develop." That night, I cried myself to sleep. Something was deeply wrong. I could feel it. But what could I do? Sarah was the children's mother, and Robert seemed supportive of her decisions. Who was I to question how they chose to raise their children? Still, the pain of being separated from my grandchildren, almost physical, as if a part of my heart were being ripped out. The next day, I called Robert at his office, hoping he could give me a more detailed explanation. His secretary said he was in a meeting, but would call me back. He never did. I tried again the next day and the next. Always the same response: "Mr. Wilson is busy at the moment, but we will return your call." Finally, after a week of failed attempts, I emailed Robert, "I'm worried. Can we have lunch together sometime this week, just the 2 of us, please, son? I miss you." The reply came 2 days later, short and formal: "Mom, I'm incredibly busy at work right now." Sarah explained the situation. "Please give us the space we asked for. We'll talk when things calm down, Robert." 1 month turned into 2, then 3. My calls were rarely answered. When Robert finally answered, he sounded rushed, saying they were always busy, that the kids had too many activities. "It's just a phase, Mom," he'd say. "Sarah's under a lot of pressure with both kids. Things will get back to normal soon." But they didn't. On the contrary, they got worse. During this period of forced separation, I continued sending my monthly contribution. It was now $800, as Sarah had called me, explaining that with inflation and rising education costs, it would be nice to increase it a bit. "You want the best for your grandchildren, don't you, Anne?" she asked, her voice as sweet as poisoned honey. I agreed, of course. What else could I do? It was my only remaining link to Emma and Liam, even if it was only financial. In a desperate attempt to maintain contact, I began sending cards and small gifts through the mail. Birthday cards, Christmas presents, even little notes simply saying, "Grandma loves you." I never received confirmation that they were delivered. When I asked Robert, he would vaguely say yes. The children had received them, that they liked them, but he would always quickly change the subject. It was on Emma's 5th birthday that the real nightmare began. I hadn't seen my grandchildren in person for 6 months. Only occasional photos sent by Robert and brief phone conversations supervised by Sarah. So when I received a formal invitation to Emma's birthday party, I was thrilled. I bought a new dress, ordered the biggest teddy bear I could find, and drove to their house with a light heart for the first time in months. But something was wrong. The house was full of people I'd never seen before. Elegant mothers with their daughters dressed as little princesses, men in suits talking about the stock. Market extravagant frozen-themed decor that must have cost thousands of dollars. In the midst of it all was Emma, my little Emma, wearing a dress that looked like something out of a fairy tale and a tiny tiara on her head. When she saw me, her eyes lit up. "Grandma," she cried, running toward me. I hugged her tightly, tears welling in my eyes. "I've missed you so much, my love." Sarah appeared as if by magic, smiling that smile I now recognized as completely fake. "Emma, honey, your school friends are asking you to take pictures." Emma reluctantly pulled away from me, and as soon as she was out of earshot, Sarah's smile disappeared. "You're late," she hissed. "And what's this?" She pointed at the enormous teddy bear. I specifically said on the invitation, "No bulky gifts. It's ruining the aesthetic of the party." I felt my face burn with embarrassment and confusion. "Sorry, I didn't realize there hadn't actually been any mention of gift sizes on the invitation, but at that moment I doubted my own memory." "Leave it in the garage," she ordered. "And please try not to attract too much attention. Emma's friends' parents are very influential people." I silently obeyed, placing the bear in the garage before returning to the party feeling completely out of place. While putting away the bear, I noticed something strange in the garage. There was a stack of boxes in a corner, some still closed, others partially open. I recognized one of them. It contained a set of children's books I'd sent Liam 3 months earlier. Next to it was a small wooden train set I'd given him the year before, still in its original packaging. And even more disturbing, I saw several open envelopes stacked in a cardboard. Books. I recognized my own handwriting on the addresses. They were the cards I'd sent over the past few months. They were all open, but apparently never delivered to the children. My heart sank. The kids probably didn't even know I was thinking of them, sending gifts and cards. Sarah was eavesdropping on everything. For a moment, I considered confronting her right there at the party. But looking through the garage door, I saw Emma laughing with her friends, looking so happy. I couldn't cause a scene on her birthday. So I swallowed my anger and returned to the party, determined to at least enjoy the little time I had with my grandchildren. I spent the next 2 hours watching from afar as my granddaughter opened dozens of expensive gifts, ate cake, and played with children she barely knew. Liam was being cared for by a babysitter in a corner, virtually ignored during his sister's party. I approached him a few times, but the babysitter politely stopped me from picking him up, saying he was on a specific schedule, and that Sarah had given explicit instructions. When I finally had a moment alone with him, I knelt down and opened my arms. "Liam, do you remember Grandma to my pain?" He looked at me warily, no recognition in his small eyes. How could he? He'd barely seen me in months, and at only 3 years old, memories fade quickly. "It's me, dear. Grandma Ann." He tilted his head curiously. "Grandma," he repeated uncertainly. "Mommy said you're sick." I was shocked. "Sick? No, honey, I'm perfectly fine." But before I could say anything else, the nanny reappeared, leading Liam by the hand. "Time for his snack, ma'am," she said firmly. I stood there watching as my grandson was led away, trying to process what he'd said. Was Sarah telling the children I was sick? Was that why I couldn't see them? When the party finally ended and the guests began to leave, I tried to approach Emma again. She was exhausted, but smiled when she saw me. "Grandma, did you see my presents? I got a dollhouse bigger than me." I smiled, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yes, I did, dear. It's wonderful." I bent down to hug her again, but Sarah appeared, taking Emma's hand. Bath time, dear? Say goodbye to Grandma. But Sarah, I protested softly. I've barely had time with her today. Maybe I could help with her bath or read her a bedtime story. The look I received in response froze my blood. I don't think you understand, Anne. The party is over. Emma is tired. You can visit her another day. Emma looked between us, confused by the sudden tension. But I want Grandma to read a story. She protested, her bottom lip starting to tremble. Sarah knelt down, her face level with Emma's. Honey, remember what we talked about how Grandma can't work too hard because she's sick? We don't want her to get sicker, do we? Emma nodded solemnly, then turned to me with worried eyes. It's okay, Grandma. You need to rest to get better. I was speechless, staring at Sarah with a mixture of shock and fury. She was using my own grandchildren against me, feeding them lies to justify my forced absence from their lives. But again, I couldn't make a scene in front of the children. So I forced a smile and said to Emma, "You're right, dear. Grandma needs to rest. But I'm getting stronger every day, and soon we'll be able to spend more time together." Robert, who had spent most of the party networking with the other parents, finally approached. "Mom, I'm sorry I didn't talk to you much today. It was crazy." He sounded genuinely sorry, but also exhausted. "Maybe you could come back next weekend for a quiet lunch, just the family." Before I could respond, Sarah interrupted. "Actually, Robert, did you forget we have that engagement at the country club next weekend?" The charity golf tournament. Robert frowned. "Oh, yeah, I completely forgot." He turned to me with an apologetic smile. "Maybe next week then," I nodded, feeling a weight on my chest that I couldn't explain. As I drove home that night, silent tears streamed down my face. Something was very wrong, but I still couldn't put my finger on it. I just knew my grandchildren were being slowly taken away from me, and that Sarah was behind it. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I made a decision. I could no longer stand by while Sarah manipulated my family. I needed to find out what was really going on. The next morning, I called an old coworker, Nancy, whose son was a lawyer. "Nancy, I need some legal advice. Do you think your son could talk to me?" 2 days later, I was sitting in Nancy's son James's office. He listened patiently as I unpacked the whole story: the $800 a month, the gradual withdrawal, the lies about my health, the intercepted gifts and cards. When I finished, he sighed deeply. "Ms. Wilson, unfortunately, this is a situation I see all too often. It's a form of financial and emotional abuse that often targets older adults, especially those with financial resources." Abuse, the word shocked me. Was I being abused by my own daughter-in-law? "What can I do?" I asked, feeling simultaneously vulnerable and determined. James thought for a moment. "First, we need to ensure your financial security. I'm going to recommend that you immediately stop these monthly transfers." I shook my head. "But what if they completely prevent me from seeing the children?" He looked at me sympathetically. "Mrs. Wilson, they're already doing that. Money is the only leverage you have, and they're using it against you." James then suggested I hire a private investigator to look into what was happening with the money I'd contributed over the years. If we can prove these funds were misused, especially if they were misrepresented as an educational fund for your grandchildren, you'll have a much stronger legal case. The promised family lunch never happened. There was always some excuse: the kids caught a cold, Robert had an urgent project at work, Sarah had a migraine. Weeks turned into months and months, into almost an entire year, where I saw my grandchildren only 3 times, always on public occasions like Christmas or Robert's birthday, always under Sarah's watchful eye. Meanwhile, following James's advice, I stopped my $800 monthly contribution. The reaction was immediate. Sarah called me the next day, her voice falsely concerned. "And dearest, I just noticed there was a problem with your transfer this month. The bank must have made some mistake. Do you want me to help you resolve it?" I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "It wasn't a mistake, Sarah. I've decided to stop the contributions for a while." There was a long silence, then her voice returned, this time cold as ice. "I understand. Robert will be very disappointed. He always believed you cared about the children's future." "I care deeply," I replied, trying to remain calm. but I'd like to better understand how this money is being used. After all, it's almost $50,000 over the years." Another, even longer silence. "I think you're getting senile, N. It's an educational fund, as we've always said. But if you don't trust us to manage it, perhaps it's for the best." 3 days later, Robert called me. His voice sounded strange, as if he were reading from a script. "Mom, Sarah told me about your decision. I've single quotes disappointed. I thought you wanted to help secure Emma and Liam's future." I closed my eyes, feeling the pain of hearing my own son speak to me this way. "Robert, do you know how much money I've contributed? If you've seen the statements for this supposed educational fund?" He hesitated. "Sarah handles the finances. She says everything is in order." "And you believe her blindly?" I asked softly. There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, almost a whisper. "Mom, I can't talk about this right now. Sarah could come back at any moment." My heart raced. It was the first indication that Robert might not be fully on the same page with his wife. "Robert, are you okay? Are the kids okay? I heard a door open in the background." "I have to go," he said hurriedly. "Love you, Mom." And he hung up. That brief conversation made me even more worried. What was really going on in that house? Robert seemed afraid of his own wife. I called James and reported the conversation. He advised me to continue refusing any requests for money, but to try to keep the lines of communication open. If your son is starting to question the situation, this could be an important opening. The private investigator I hired, a man named Marcus, began sending me preliminary reports. Sarah had an interesting background. Her real name was Sarah Jenkins, not Parker, as she had told Robert. She had legally changed her name 5 years before meeting him. Her parents weren't traveling in Europe during their marriage, in fact. Her father had passed away years earlier, and her mother was living in a nursing home in Nevada. Even more alarming, Sarah had been investigated for possible financial fraud at her previous job, though the case had been dropped due to lack of conclusive evidence. I was shocked to read this information. Who was this woman my son had married? What other lies had she told Marcus? Continued his investigation, now focusing on the fate of the money I had contributed over the years. He discovered that there was no educational fund in Emma or Liam's name. Instead, the money had been transferred to a private account in Sarah's name alone, an account Robert apparently had no knowledge of. With each new discovery, my determination grew. It wasn't just about the money, it was about protecting my son and grandchildren. From a woman who had clearly entered our lives with questionable intentions. But I needed to be careful. If I confronted Sarah directly with this information, she might retaliate by making it even harder for me to see the children. Or worse, she might do something drastic. As I was deciding my next step, I received an unexpected call from Robert on a Tuesday afternoon. His voice was strained, almost unrecognizable. "Mom, I need to see you. Now, can you come to the cafe near your apartment?" The urgency in his voice alarmed me. "Sure, son. I'm coming." "Is everything okay?" There was a long pause. "No, it's not okay at all. But I can't talk on the phone. Meet me in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like an eternity. 1,000 catastrophic scenarios ran through my head. Was someone sick? Had there been an accident? Were the children okay when I finally arrived at the cafe? Robert was already there, sitting at a table in the far corner, an untouched cup of coffee in front of him. He looked like he'd aged 10 years since I'd last seen him. Dark circles under his eyes, disheveled hair, slumped shoulders. "Robert, what happened?" I asked, sitting down across from him. He didn't answer right away, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and defeated. "Sarah's been cheating on me, Mom. She's been cheating on me for at least a year." I was in shock, unable to process what I was hearing. "How do you know?" was all I could ask. He ran his hand over his face, looking even more exhausted. "I found messages on her phone, explicit, with photos. With my boss, my mother. My direct boss." He let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "And when I confronted Sarah, you know what she said, that I should be grateful. That, thanks to her relationship with him, I got my promotions. that she did it for us, for our family. I reached across the table, taking his hand. It was cold and trembling. "Oh, Robert, I'm so sorry." He nodded, swallowing hard. "There's more, Mom. Much more." He took an envelope from his inside coat pocket and placed it on the table between us. "I think you should see this." Inside the envelope were bank statements, dozens of them covering the past 5 years. As I sifted through them, my heart sank. Their documented in black and white was proof of what? I'd subconsciously feared my $800 a month never went to an education fund. It went directly to credit card bills, luxury resort vacations, designer handbags, and shoes and spa treatments. The statements also showed regular transfers to a separate account, an account in Sarah's name alone. "She has almost $120,000 in that account," Robert said, his voice now thick with emotion. "Money she's been accumulating over the years. My money, her money. Meanwhile, we're drowning in debt. The mortgage is late, the credit cards are maxed out. Emma's expensive school, we're 2/4 in debt." I felt sick, a toxic mix of anger, betrayal, and guilt for not realizing it sooner. "Why didn't you ever tell me, Robert, about the debts, about your financial situation?" He couldn't look me in the eye. Shame, I suppose? And Sarah. She was always convincing. She always had an explanation for everything. She always promised things would get better next month with the next bonus, the next promotion. And I believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to believe her. He continued, the words now coming out in a steady stream as if a dam had broken. "She's been manipulating me for years, Mom. Isolating me from friends, from you. Controlling every aspect of our lives. When I tried to question our finances in the past, she'd cry, tell me I didn't trust her, that I was ruining our marriage. Or worse, threatened to take the kids away from me, saying no judge would give custody to an absent father who works 60 hours a week." We were silent for a few moments, the weight of the truth crushing between us. Finally, I asked what I most wanted to know. "What about the kids? Do Emma and Liam know anything?" Robert shook his head. "No, thank God, but I'm scared, Mom. Sarah, it's unpredictable." When I confronted her last night after the kids went to bed, she was furious. Not because I discovered the betrayal, but because I'd meddled with her finances. She said things, ... threats. My heart raced. What kind of threats? He hesitated before answering. She said if I tried for a divorce, she'd take the kids away. That she had connections, powerful people on her side. That I'd never see them again. His voice trailed off. "And I think she meant it, Mom. She packed her bags this morning, said she was taking the kids to her sister's house in New Hampshire for a few days to give me time to think things through." It was like a lightning bolt had struck me. "Robert, you can't let her do this. If she leaves the state with the kids..." He nodded, fear evident in his eyes. "I know. That's why I'm here. I need your help, Mom. I need money for a lawyer, a good one. I need to file for emergency custody before she does something drastic. But I'm completely broke." I didn't hesitate for a second. "How much do you need?" He named a sum that represented almost all of my remaining savings. The money I'd saved for my own retirement? "You'll have it," I promised. "Let's go to the bank right now." As we drove to the bank, Robert shared more details about his marital life over the past few years. Sarah had gradually taken complete control of his finances, isolating him from friends and family, constantly criticizing him and undermining his self-confidence. "She always made it seem like any problem was my fault," he explained. "If I worked too much, I was an absentee father. If I tried to spend more time at home, I wasn't being ambitious enough. It was never right." He also revealed how Sarah had manipulated the children. "She tells them I work so much because I prefer the office to them. Or worse, as you discovered, she makes up stories about you being sick to explain your absence. Emma sometimes cries at night, worried that sick grandma might die without her being able to say goodbye." Each new revelation was like a knife to my heart. How could I have let this happen? How could I have missed the signs? But now was not the time for guilt or remorse. It was time to act. 3 days later, Robert had a lawyer and a preliminary hearing scheduled for the following week. Sarah, as we suspected, hadn't gone to her sister's house. Instead, she booked a room at a luxury hotel 2 hours away using the credit card Robert hadn't yet canceled. He traced the transaction and, following his lawyer's advice, informed the police about the potential risk of her trying to leave the state with the children. On the fourth day, I got a call from Sarah. Her tone was falsely sweet, like poisoned honey. "Anne, honey, I know you and Robert talked. He's probably very upset and confused right now, telling exaggerated stories. You know how dramatic men can be." I kept my voice neutral, following the lawyer's advice not to confront her directly. "Are the kids okay, Sarah?" There was a slight pause. "Of course they are. We're having a little retreat, that's all. Some time to relax. Can I talk to them?" I asked. Another pause. "They're sleeping now." "Maybe tomorrow, actually, and I was thinking, when we get home, maybe you could stay with the kids for a weekend. Robert and I obviously need some time alone to work out our differences." That caught me off guard. After years of limiting my access to my grandchildren, Sarah now wanted me to keep them for an entire weekend. Something was very wrong. "That would be wonderful," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "When are you guys coming back?" "I'm not sure yet," she replied vaguely. "Maybe later this week. I'll call you to work out the details, okay?" As soon as the call ended, I called Robert. His reaction confirmed my suspicions. "She's planning something," he said, his voice tight with worry. "The lawyer thinks she might be trying to use you as part of some scheme. Maybe to legally take the kids away from me while she sorts things out." The next morning, Robert received the notice Sarah had filed for a restraining order against him, alleging verbal and emotional abuse. The allegations were completely false, of course, but enough to temporarily keep him away from the house and the children. Meanwhile, I received another call from Sarah, this time in tears. "And I don't know what to do. Robert has been so mean to me lately. The kids are scared. Can we stay with you for a few days when we get back, just until things calm down?" Plan was becoming clear. She would use my home as a temporary refuge, establish that the children were in my care because Robert was dangerous, and then when she felt it was safe, she would disappear with them. Probably to another state, maybe even another country. I followed the lawyer's instructions, pretending to agree with her plan while we stalled for the hearing. "Of course, Sarah," she said with false sympathy. "My door is always open to you and the children." "When are you planning to come?" she sobbed dramatically. "Maybe this weekend. I'm so scared. And Robert said horrible things, threatened to take the children away from me. You won't believe me when I tell you everything." "I'm here for you," I replied, nearly choking on the words. "Just let me know when you're on your way." After hanging up, I immediately informed the lawyer and Robert about the conversation. The lawyer was impressed by Sarah's audacity. "She's creating a narrative. First, the restraining order against your son. Now establishing you as a safe haven for her and the children away from him. She probably plans to use this in court to prove that even his own mother considers him a danger." The day of the preliminary hearing finally arrived. Sarah didn't show up, sending only her lawyer, who requested a postponement, claiming his client was still too traumatized to face her alleged abuser. The judge granted a 3-day postponement, but with one condition: Sarah must return to the family home with the children immediately or face charges of fleeing with minors. Her lawyer assured her that she would comply with the order. That night, Sarah called me again. Her voice now held no pretense of sweetness. "I know what you and Robert are doing," she hissed. "You think you can corner me? I have news for you. No one is taking my children away from me. No one." "Sarah," I tried to remain calm. "No one is trying to take the children away from you. Robert just wants his parental rights respected. And I just want to be able to see my grandchildren regularly." She laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "Oh, and always so naive. Do you really think you'll see Emma and Liam again after this, after turning against me? You won't see your precious grandchildren grow up. You won't be at their birthdays, their graduations, their weddings. You're dead to this family." Her words hit me like physical blows, but I forced myself not to react emotionally. "The judge ordered you to return home with the children, Sarah. If you don't," she interrupted me, "the judge doesn't run my life. No one does." After she abruptly hung up, I sat there for a long time, trembling. Sarah's explicit threat, "You won't see your precious grandchildren grow up" resonated in my mind like a nightmare. I called Robert immediately to report the conversation. He was as alarmed as I was. "I'm calling the lawyer right now," he said. "And the police. This is clearly a threat." The next morning, Sarah's attorney informed the court that she had suffered a family emergency and needed to travel out of state with the children. The judge, visibly angered by this defiance of his previous order, immediately issued a search and seizure order for the children and temporarily suspended all custody rights over Sarah until she appeared in court to explain her actions. What followed were 3 weeks of pure hell. Sarah had indeed disappeared with Emma and Liam. Her phone was turned off, her email account inactive. Police in several states were notified. Robert's boss, the man Sarah was having an affair with, denied knowing anything, but he was placed under surveillance. We spent days and nights in constant anguish, wondering where the children were, if they were scared, if they knew what was happening. Robert took leave from work, spending every waking moment trying to track down his family. Private investigator Marcus now worked exclusively on our case, following every possible lead. We discovered that Sarah had withdrawn a large sum of money, nearly $50,000, from her secret account 2 days before she disappeared. She had also requested duplicates of the children's passports a few weeks earlier, claiming the originals had been lost. "She's been planning this for weeks," the lawyer said darkly. "Maybe ever since you stopped sending money, or ever since Robert started questioning the finances. She knew her scheme was falling apart and had a plan B in place." Police were able to confirm that Sarah had briefly stopped by her sister's house in New Hampshire, but left the next day. The sister, a woman named Rebecca, was questioned and claimed not to know where Sarah had gone. She just said she needed time away from an abusive husband, Rebecca told investigators. I believed her. Why wouldn't I believe my own sister? It was in that dark moment when hope was beginning to fade that I remembered the document. Years ago, when Emma was just 2 years old, Sarah had asked me to sign some paperwork regarding health insurance for the children. I signed without question, trusting her completely. But something about those papers bothered me later, and I ended up making copies before returning them. Those copies had been tucked away in the back of my jewelry drawer for almost 5 years, forgotten until that crucial moment. I ran home and rummaged through my jewelry drawer, pushing aside necklaces and earrings until I found the yellowed envelope at the bottom. With trembling hands, I opened it and examined the documents inside. At first glance, they did indeed look like health insurance forms. But upon closer inspection, I realized they were much more than that. They were complex legal documents written in dense legalese that I hadn't fully understood at the time. I found the papers and handed them to Robert's lawyer. He examined them with growing interest and then, with a gleam in his eye, he said the words that would change everything. "This is not a health insurance form. It is an affidavit in which Mrs. Sarah Wilson admits to committing financial fraud in a previous case and names you, Anne, as the children's secondary legal guardian should anything happen to her or Robert." Apparently, Sarah had a past she carefully concealed. She had been investigated for fraud in Nevada years before meeting Robert. To avoid formal charges, she made a plea bargain, part of which included this affidavit. For some incomprehensible reason, she used this real document, probably because she needed an authentic signature. But she trusted that I would never read the actual content written on it, a mistake that would cost her everything. The lawyer explained the importance of the document. "This is a complete game changer. Not only do we have proof of prior fraud, which destroys her credibility in any court, but you also have legal status as the children's guardian. This means she is technically kidnapping the children not only from the father, but also from the secondary legal guardian." The lawyer filed the document with the court immediately. The judge, already angered by Sarah's behavior, issued a federal warrant for her location, an arrest for contempt, fraud on the court, and now kidnapping of minors of whom I had joint legal custody under the document she herself had created. The investigation now took on renewed urgency. The FBI was involved due to the interstate nature of the case and the possibility that Sarah might attempt to leave the country with the children. Her photos, along with those of Emma and Liam, were distributed to airports, bus stations, and border crossings across the country. Her passport was marked, as were the children's. Marcus, our investigator, had a brilliant idea. Instead of focusing solely on Sarah, he began investigating her lover, Robert's boss. "Follow the money," he explained. "If she's planning an escape, she needs resources. And if he was involved with her for so long, he might be helping her now." His intuition was correct. An analysis of the man's bank accounts revealed a large recent withdrawal made the same day Sarah disappeared. More importantly, he had made hotel reservations in Toronto, Canada, under a false name but using his own credit card. Marcus found the reservation while combing through the man's financial records. 3 rooms in a luxury hotel over a 12-week period. 3 bedrooms, Robert observed. 1 for him, 1 for Sarah, and 1 for the children. The Canadian police were notified immediately, and a joint operation was planned. They couldn't simply raid the risk to the children was too high. Instead, surveillance was established, and the strategy was to bide their time. 2 days later, Sarah was located at the Toronto hotel, confirming our suspicions. Canadian police, working with American authorities, observed the hotel for 24 hours, confirming her and the children's presence and verifying their movements and routines. Robert's boss was also there, spending time with Sarah while the children were being cared for by a hired nanny. Finally, the perfect moment arrived. Sarah and her lover went out to dinner, leaving the children with the nanny. The police approached the nanny, explained the situation, and then waited in the room. When Sarah returned, she was immediately arrested, much to her surprise and fury. The children, fortunately, were sleeping in the next room and did not witness the scene. Sarah was arrested and extradited back to the United States, facing multiple criminal charges in addition to divorce proceedings. Her lover was also arrested, accused of complicity in child abduction and crossing state lines to avoid legal proceedings. For Robert, there was a bitter satisfaction in seeing the man who had betrayed his professional and personal trust face serious consequences. Robert and I immediately flew to Toronto to pick up the children. The moment I saw them again at the Canadian police office is something I'll never forget. Emma, now almost 7, ran to me crying. "Grandma, Mommy said you didn't love us anymore, that you didn't want to see us." I hugged her tightly, tears streaming down my face. "That would never be true, my love. Never. I've always loved you, and I always will." Liam, still too young to fully understand what was happening, clung to his father as if afraid he might disappear at any moment. Returning home was the beginning of a long healing process. The children needed therapy to process the trauma of what they had been through. Robert had to rebuild his career after the scandal with his boss came to light. And I had to learn to trust again, to not feel guilty for not realizing what Sarah was doing sooner. The following months were a whirlwind of court hearings, therapy sessions, and attempts to restore some normalcy to the children's lives. Emma, in particular, was confused and hurt. "Why did Mom lie to us?" she asked repeatedly. "Why did she say you were sick, Grandma?" These were painful questions for which we had no easy answers. Therapists advised us to be honest with the children, but in an age-appropriate way. "Sometimes adults make bad decisions," we explained. "Decisions that hurt the people they love. Your mother made some very bad choices. And now she's facing the consequences of those choices." Liam, just 4 years old, accepted this explanation more easily than Emma. For him, the world was still quite simple. He was with his father and grandmother who loved and cared for him, and that was enough. Emma, on the other hand, missed her mother despite everything. She was mean sometimes, she admitted in one of our conversations. She yelled at Dad a lot and made me sad. But she also told me stories and braided my hair. The lawyer explained that given the circumstances, it was highly unlikely Sarah would regain primary custody. However, after completing her sentence, she could request supervised visitation. "It's up to you," he told Robert and me, "to decide whether this would be beneficial for the children. The court will respect your opinion given the extraordinary circumstances." Robert and I discussed this at length. Despite everything Sarah had done, she was still the children's biological mother. "I don't want them to grow up feeling abandoned," Robert finally said. "If in the future, after she's served her time and shown Some genuine remorse that children want to see her in a controlled and supervised environment. Well, I think we need to consider that. Not for her sake, but for theirs. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Sarah was sentenced to 3 years in prison on multiple charges including fraud, contempt of court, and unlawful removal of minors. The money she had hidden in a separate account was confiscated and placed in a trust fund for Emma and Liam's education, administered by a neutral third party. She lost all custody rights with only supervised visitation allowed after serving her sentence. Robert sold the big house and moved into a 3-room apartment closer to mine. Together, we began rebuilding a life for the children, one based on genuine love and honesty. Emma and Liam spent 3 afternoons a week with me after school and often slept over on weekends, giving Robert some time to himself and me the opportunity to finally be the grandmother he always wanted to be. It was during one such afternoon, about a year after we brought the children back from Canada, that Emma asked me a question that broke my heart. We were baking cookies together, something that had become our little ritual, when she paused holding the star-shaped cookie cutter and asked, "Grandma, why didn't Mommy really love us?" I set the bowl of pasta aside and knelt down to her eye level. "Emma, honey, your mother loves you and Liam in her own way. But sometimes people are so lost, so confused in their own lives that they can't show love in the right way. That doesn't mean the problem is you. It never was." She nodded slowly, processing my words with wisdom beyond her years. "How do we know if someone truly loves us?" Then I thought carefully before answering. "True love doesn't hurt, Emma. It doesn't lie. It doesn't use people as pawns in a game. True love wants you to grow up strong and happy, even if that sometimes means putting your needs above your own. That's how your father loves you. That's how I love you. And one day you'll recognize that kind of love in others too." She thought about it for a moment, then went back to cutting cookies. Later, while the cookies were baking, she came to me and hugged me spontaneously. "I really love you, Grandma," she whispered. I held her tight, my eyes filling with tears. "I really love you too, my darling. Always." As we adjusted to our new normal, Robert also began to heal. The trauma of an abusive marriage, the betrayal, the near kidnapping of his children, all of it left deep scars. He began attending a support group for survivors of abusive relationships, surprised to discover he wasn't. It's the only man in the group. "I always thought men couldn't be victims of abuse," he told me one night after the kids went to bed. "That it was weak of me not to have realized what was happening, not to have stopped it." The group helped Robert understand that abuse has no gender, that skilled manipulators like Sarah can deceive even intelligent and strong people. Gradually, I saw my son regain his confidence and his sense of self-worth. He found a new job at a smaller company with less pressure and a more friendly environment. The salary was lower, but the quality of life was immensely better. The children also began to thrive in their new environment. Emma initially removed from her expensive school and transferred to a local public school, surprisingly flourished. "The teachers really care about me, their daddy," she explained. "And I have real friends, not just kids who only talk about their big houses and expensive toys." Liam, now in preschool, proved to be a cheerful and sociable child with an early passion for music and art. I too went through my own healing journey. The guilt of not realizing what Sarah was doing, of having inadvertently funded her scheme, still occasionally consumed me. My therapist helped me understand that manipulators like Sarah are experts at exploiting people's kindness and trust. "You're not to blame for trusting Anne," he told me. "Trust is a virtue, not a flaw. Sarah is the only one to blame for abusing that trust." About 2 years after the children's return, Robert met someone. Melissa was a nurse at the hospital where Emma had been treated for a minor arm fracture during a soccer game. Unlike Sarah, in every possible way, Melissa was kind, honest, and genuinely loving to the children. She never tried to replace their mother, never forced a relationship, only offered friendship and support. Robert was extremely cautious at first, fearing repeating past mistakes. He introduced Melissa as a friend for almost 6 months before admitting to the children or me that they were actually dating. I understood his caution and respected his pace. When I finally met her officially as Robert's girlfriend, I was delighted. Melissa treated me with genuine respect and affection, interested in my life and opinions without any ulterior motive. She's different, Robert told me one day as we watched Melissa helping Emma with a science project. So different from Sarah that sometimes I wonder how I could have been so blind. I squeezed his hand. You weren't looking for evil in Sarah because there's no evil in you, son. But now your eyes are open and you can see what's real. Today, 3 years after that terrible day when Sarah threatened that, I would never see my grandchildren again. Our family is stronger than ever. Robert and Melissa are engaged with plans for a small wedding next summer. The children are thriving in their new schools. Liam, now 7, has discovered a talent for music, playing the piano with precocious enthusiasm. Emma, 10, dreams of being a veterinarian and spends hours volunteering at the local animal shelter. Sarah served her sentence and was released 6 months ago. Supervised visits recently began once a month at a family center. The children have complicated feelings about this, especially Emma, who is old enough to remember more clearly what happened. But all of us, including her therapists, believe that some kind of relationship with their mother is important for their healthy emotional development as long as it is safe and structured. During the first few visits, Sarah seemed remorseful and humble. She brought small quarter-proved gifts and kept the conversation light and appropriate. However, I noticed that after each visit, Emma became thoughtful and quiet. When I finally asked her what was wrong, she replied, "Mommy still makes promises, Grandma. She whispers that one day we'll all be together again, that Daddy and you don't understand how much she loves us." We informed Sarah's probation officer and the court immediately. Future visits would be even more closely monitored with a social worker present in the room at all times. Sarah lost the privilege of whispering anything to the children or being alone with them for even a moment. She protested, of course, claiming we were making up stories to harm her. But Emma, brave as ever, repeated what she had said to the judge, who believed her without hesitation. For myself, I've learned difficult but valuable lessons. I've learned that love isn't submission, that setting healthy boundaries isn't selfish, that trust is important, but so is verification. And most crucially, that standing up for those we love, even when it's difficult or scary, is one of the most powerful acts we can perform. That document hidden deep in my jewelry drawer wasn't just a piece of paper that changed our legal fate. It was a symbol of what happens when the truth finally comes to light, when lies and manipulation are exposed to the purifying sun of truth. Sarah lost everything because she built her life on falsehoods. We gained everything back because in the end, we chose the truth, no matter how painful. The lesson I learned, and which I hope to convey through my story, is that we should never let fear stop us from standing up for what's right. I was afraid of completely losing contact with my grandchildren, so I tolerated Sarah's behavior. Robert was afraid to face the truth about his marriage, so he ignored the warning signs. Our fears nearly cost us everything we loved most. Today, I look at Emma and Liam growing up safe and loved at Robert, finally finding true happiness with Melissa, and I know that all the pain was worth it. The truth, though initially painful, set us free. And the courage to face that truth allowed us to rebuild our lives on stronger, more authentic foundations. If you're going through something similar, if you feel like you're being alienated from your loved ones by someone controlling and manipulative, know that you're not alone. Know that there is hope. Know that it's worth fighting for what's right, even when it seems impossible. And if you enjoyed this story, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. In the comments, tell me, have you ever faced a situation where you had to stand up to a family member for the sake of others? How did you handle it? Your experiences can help others going through similar situations right now. Together, we form a community of support and understanding where our stories can illuminate each other's path. Thank you for listening today.